just get to it. I'm going to present some slides, my story, and my goal is to engage everybody and create a little bit of information and questions, and then we'll go from there. This is an open forum from my perspective. I don't like lecturing one way. So my name is Navin Goyal. I'm CEO of Loud Capital and author of Physician Underdog, which I'll kind of get into. But this is literally about my story, why I'm here, and what I have to share. So I'm, in the States right now. I attended Ohio State, if anyone's ever heard of it. So it's a very large college here in Columbus, Ohio. I'm traveling to Chicago today. I majored in molecular genetics, and molecular genetics sounds very complex and very boring because it is. It's very boring. And the reason I did it is because my brother-in-law said, if you do something really fancy and put it on your medical application, you can get into medical school a little bit easier. So I listened to him, which was one of my regrets because it probably brought down my grades. It was very tough. I still don't understand it. And I fortunately got into medical school, but I have a really big doubt that it was because I picked molecular genetics. Ended up going to medical school for 4 years in Cincinnati and did anesthesiology training at University of Chicago. Chicago is like my second home. I love it here and have a lot of family here. Ended up moving back to Columbus for private practice. So after 12 years of training and wanting to be a doctor and becoming it, I like to tell people very openly it was not easy. It was very challenging for me, but I worked hard and I got in. I joined a really great private practice at a large hospital here in Columbus, Ohio. I call it my dream job because it was a large private practice, had a variety of cases. As an anesthesiologist, you put a lot of people to sleep, and that's my goal today is not to put anyone to sleep, but actually to inspire and uplift you. But it was a great paying practice. I felt very accomplished because finally, after 12 years, I got my dream job. And, you get to apply all this skill set that you've been learning for years under other people. So finally, you're on your own. Eventually, and that was back in 2008. Eventually, I started reading at the age of 31. And so my parents had told me, okay, read books, do all this stuff. I didn't read anything outside of the books I needed to. And so at the age of 31, I started actually having a little more free time. I realized I actually don't need to study for any more tests. I passed my board exams. And what do I do now? After you start a new job of any profession, right? After a while, your learning curve goes down. And there's a little bit like, okay, I know the routine. I know things here. So I started reading a lot of books, basically some, sci-fi stuff, but then eventually nonfiction and entrepreneurial stories. I was getting inspired by, the Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. I was reading the section of the Wall Street Journal a lot. I still do. I veered towards the business section, and I started reading about companies going public, and I started reading about the stories and the journeys behind them, and I was very inspired, not only because people were making money. Of course, the financial compensation was cool, but really that people got to invest in companies, and then they got to be a part of the journey and experience it and get to know people. And to me, that was very inspiring. So I ended up getting into, learning about businesses through books and the Wall Street Journal. I ended up doing some investing. So finally, after you catch up on some loans, anesthesiology pays well in the U.S., so I was fortunate enough to have some extra capital to invest. And the default, I feel like, is always like, okay, let's do some real estate. So I started investing in some real estate with some friends. And these were local projects, more single-family homes, so it wasn't huge projects, but it was something I was excited about. I was grateful to be able to invest. I started meeting various entrepreneurs as I was getting into real estate, but also started to angel invest. I was reading about all these angel investors. I had some risk tolerance, and I started meeting great people with great companies. So I ended up veering towards angel investing because I feel like I was investing in something and, again, becoming friends, having skin in the game, and naturally becoming part of the team, if you will, because it's so early in the company that they rely on anyone they can with regards to experience. In 2014, I had the opportunity, being an anesthesiologist, I knew the anesthesia part, but I didn't know anything about business outside of reading and outside of starting to invest in some companies. I had the opportunity to start a company called Smile MD in 2014. And basically what it was a few dentists came up to myself and a few other friends of mine who were also anesthesiologists and said, hey, would it be possible to bring anesthesia services to my dental practice? I have a high-end cosmetic dental practice. That would be great if we could do something like that. And, I said, I've never really thought about that, because especially in the U.S., I think this is pretty global. Dental and medical, there's just a huge wall. There's not a lot of communication. They have their own industries and practitioners and people, but a lot of people don't talk in either side. So I didn't know a lot about the dental world. After digging in and realizing there's a need for anesthesia services, but not really a structured way to do it, we started this company called Smile MD. And so it was myself and two other anesthesiologists. They were very close friends of mine, so the trust was there. We, I think, encouraged each other to move forward, and that's why we are here today, versus if it was a solo question to me, I think it would be a bit intimidating to do. That's just my perspective at the moment. And what we did was we partnered with various dental offices. We coordinated scheduling. We brought our supplies, medications, equipment, etc. And you can imagine doing anesthesia in anywhere is not like bringing a toolbox and showing up and saying, okay, let's go. It's really planning for things that can go bad. It's planning for a smooth day, etc. And as an anesthesiologist, it might not be a common thing to know, but we plan for disasters in the hospitals, anywhere. It's all about implementing what can go wrong. Do we have the supplies, policies, and processes to be able to safely get things done? And so it's a bit overwhelming thinking about going into a dental office, not an operating room, not near a medical center, bringing supplies and everything, insurance, and then taking care of patients, giving them sedated or putting them off to sleep. All these kind of things are things we had to think about. Eventually, this model became more sophisticated, and we ended up bringing a team, not just an anesthesiologist. We also bring a nurse and a paramedic as well. Let me see. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So I just want to give you a little bit of the timeline, because today we're proudly much larger. So what we started in 2014, the three of us, very early on, we said, you know what, we're getting traction here, and there's something special here. But we were all treating this as a side gig, which I respect and I like. But eventually, you need to say, do we want to give it the best shot we have? And we ended up bringing in a practice manager. We ended up raising a little bit of capital. We ended up hiring a full team as demand was increasing. And the big change for us was that an insurance company reached out and said, hey, do you take care of kids? There's a lot of kids who need anesthesia in various parts of the country, but they're not getting treated because dental patients in the hospital world or in the operating room world are very low on the priority list. And so there's a backlog, especially of kids on Medicaid. And, basically the government program for low income, there's a long wait. So in Ohio, there's a 9 to 12 month wait to get dental extractions if you're a 5-year-old kid on Medicaid. I'm in Chicago right now, 22 to 24 months. And this is today. This is not years ago. And that's the truth here. So what we do is we bring the team to the dental office. We put kids under general anesthesia with a whole team and with all our supplies. We enable the procedure because in the end, you don't need a sterile operating room and a fancy high-cost model. You need anesthesia and a safe environment, and so that's what we've provided. And so today we're in 4 states. We're about to enter our 5th. We've raised capital. We raised $6 million Series A last year, and we just raised $9 million a few months ago in a convertible note, and proudly employ about 115 people, and we're taking care of thousands of kids who are not being served by existing medical centers. So when you talk about disruption, when you talk about a new model that's servicing people that aren't being served by an existing healthcare system, we are one example, and I'm very proud of that because it didn't start out with like this crazy thought or this crazy model. It started out small and granular, and now we see the opportunity to take care of a lot of people outside of dental and to be able to enable offices that are out there that exists in communities close to people versus medical centers that are getting taller and bigger but not closer to people. That's how I look at healthcare and how we can really change access to care. So I kind of talked about the future, but in the end, we have a very heavy business model and revenue model on the dental world because there's such a backlog here in the States. I think in general it's an issue. But now, what can we do with such skilled people that we're being able to recruit and send out to the community with all our equipment? Now we're having insurance companies ask us about gastroenterology. We're having our paramedics be able to deliver vaccines today, literally in Ohio. We have a contract. So it's like, how can we use this mobile logistical operation to do so much more care? And that's very empowering. I'm very proud of it, but it has not been straightforward. I mean, I said this kind of summary, pretty straightforward, but many times we wanted to quit because we were like, things are slow. What should we do? And there was one point in time that we said, why don't we really give this a shot and bring in someone who's waking up in the morning and thinking about it versus us waking up thinking about it but having to go to our day job. So that, I believe, was a pivot point for us, to not hold back or park this in the closet, but to push the gas pedal and say, let's give this a real shot. So a year later, after starting SmileMD, I was probably the most assertive out of us three in the sense of going out to the entrepreneurial community and saying, hey, we need to learn anything business, right? None of us had business experience or really exposure outside of some investing. And so I met a lot of entrepreneurs, some of them who I told you I invested in as angels, but there were so many people that were not only looking to grow their company, but a lot of folks were trying to raise capital. And I was a bit blinded to that initially because myself and my co-founders were anesthesiologists. We actually were able to self-fund for a while before we started raising capital, so it wasn't on top of mind. Then I realized, man, these are great people doing great things. It's really hard to find capital. And my eventual co-founder of Loud Capital, Darshan, he was at an accelerator working with a lot of entrepreneurs downtown Columbus. So we ended up really bonding on alignment of how we see entrepreneurship. And he was very frustrated about not raising capital. He said, my accelerator is supposed to grow these entrepreneurs, and then we're supposed to invest in them in the end, like we committed, but we're not really raising capital. So I said, why don't we start a fund? Like, I have people around me, physicians, non-physicians, but I know people have been asking me personally, hey, you started this company, you're angel investing, let me know how I get involved. So we opened up a fund in 2015 as a side gig with the goal of, hey, let's enable money to come in, fund these entrepreneurs. We really knew them very well, and then go from there. So that also started out as a side gig, but what I realized very early on was after we gave some funding to people, they were not only grateful, but then they were like 10 other things they started asking us in a very healthy way of like, hey, what do you think we should do here? What should we do here? So we became these natural sounding boards, and it was very fulfilling. It was very much like, hey, this isn't a transaction. This is a relationship and an opportunity to grow together. And that's what started really flipping my mindset of, hey, we started SmileMD. This is really exciting. And by the way, this is 1 year after SmileMD. So SmileMD is still very small, but it's starting to grow, and I feel accomplished that I started something and we're getting some revenue off of it. In the sense of, validation of a model, right? Once you get a first dollar in any company, I feel like that's a huge, like, wow, I did something. So I'm going to kind of go through the timeline of Loud Capital, and, there's a lot here, but basically after 2015, that first angel fund that we raised, we closed it pretty quickly. It was a very small fund, and then people started saying, hey, do you have more opportunities? One of the things I like to mention as well is that venture capital, especially back in 2015 in the Midwest, is still a young environment. And so there's a huge educational component for new investors and for what venture capital really is and the value of it. And so there was plenty of people that said, wow, this is really cool stuff, but this is risky, it's long-term, this is not for me. So early on, we started something called Merchant Cash Advance, now known as revenue financing, which essentially, is enabling financing for small market, middle market companies that need 3 to 6 month terms to help grow, buying future receivables. So there's an opportunity for investors to invest in basically a larger fund, and that fund enables financing for 3 to 6 month terms for a bunch of companies. And so you can pay, we paid some monthly dividends, but eventually we're at quarterly dividends now. And so if an investor says, hey, I want to make 10% annually, I can put in for a year term or 3 year terms. We do that a lot on our end. And so it's no longer just venture capital, it's venture capital and other alternative investments. And that's what we've slowly become. Eventually, we spread out. We opened up an office in Chicago. We opened up an office in Raleigh, North Carolina. And then we had one in Beijing, an innovation center. Recently, with all the COVID things, we've really slowed that down. But we really saw the power of investing and the power of building these relationships in community. And when you hear venture capital, many times you don't really hear community. But I believe one of the components is having a physician foundation, going from, I'm going in the hospital, I'm walking in, I'm seeing, everyone in the room is focused on the patient. It's all about the patient. I mean, that's the truth here. There's no question of alignment, why you show up to work. And then you go outside the hospital and you're trying to do business, trying to do investing, and you don't know what people are here for. And that's okay, by the way, but it's just a different environment. So what I realize is, hey, we need to find people that are focused still on people. And so when we spend money, when we spend our valuable time, when we use our experience and mindset, let's do something so we're pushing people forward. And so that's where this tagline came from, venture for people. And overall, it's a belief that venture capital can create a positive impact on society. Most people don't start that, with that when it comes to venture capital. But again, I think with my background and seeing in a very different aspect, I think there's a huge opportunity when we're spending valuable time here to make money, yes. But if you lead with more of a purpose in solving a problem and being smart about it, build a business model around that, you can be highly profitable, but very purpose driven and feel good and sleep well at night. That's my kind of thing. If I'm going to bed and I feel good about what I've done, I can sleep really well. And I can tell you right now, I sleep really well because I think we have a huge opportunity to take a lot of people's capital, time, and experience and solve a lot of problems that we all deal with or we see out there. The pursuit of ethical for-profit investing in both diverse and underserved community. I believe that venture capital is so powerful that as soon as you invest in someone or a community, they become role models. They have a stamp of credibility that other VCs or other investors, media, tout as, oh my gosh, they raised capital. That's amazing, But who puts that stamp on them, right? To me, it's a lot of VCs. And could you put a stamp on anybody? If I raised $5 million today and I decided this is an amazing entrepreneur, and we did our diligence process and we invest in that entrepreneur, that founding team, that's a stamp of credibility. So are we making sure that whoever's coming in the door is representative of communities out there? And that's what's not happening today statistically. There's a lot of white men, and especially in the U.S., that get invested in with regards to VC dollars. It's not fair for a lot of women founders who are out there hustling and other folks from underserved communities. And so what are we doing to widen the funnel to ensure that not spreading money to different people, but making sure all the skill sets out there are wide enough for you to open those doors and pick the best one. We're not saying to sacrifice anything, but we're saying make sure the funnel is wide enough. And then the responsibility to educate and inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs and investors to embrace this mindset. That's why I do talks like this and educational opportunities, our whole team does, because we believe that this philosophy is powerful, but it needs to be spoken about. And VC historically is very, what happens behind that, that door? Who makes the decision? So for myself and the team, it's about talking about our process, our mindset, and for us, also learning new things. The name Loud Capital came from being loud and active investors. And so when I was telling you about writing the first checks, and it it wasn't as just transactional. That still happens today. There's a lot of large funds and large firms that write capital. They have huge networks, but they don't really leverage it. They don't really say, hey, here's the investment. There's a bunch of great network and people and clients that we can help you with. This sounds very common sense, by the way, but there's plenty of entrepreneurs I talk to that say, gosh, I wish we had a little bit more help. And so it's that opportunity not only to mitigate risks on behalf of investors when you're investing as an investor, but it's fun, and being an entrepreneur, I believe, running a fund and running a firm, there's an opportunity not only to have fun and to build from an investment perspective, right? You don't need to found every company that's out there, but if you're an investor, you can really be part of many teams. And so when we opened up our office a few years back, we got some local media in Chicago, and they wrote an article and saying, Loud Capital opens up office in Chicago. Chicago Bulls called one of my associates. Initially, we thought it was sales for tickets, and we said, and I remember skipping the call because I was like, if you can take that call, they're probably wanting us to buy a suite or something like that. They ended up internally deciding that they wanted to do a venture competition, basically like a Shark Tank competition within the Chicago Bulls organization and the United Center. And we ended up talking with them. They're like, now that you have an office in Chicago, we saw your philosophy and we really like it. Let's talk. Now, this didn't happen overnight. Basically, several months later, after multiple meetings, we liked them, they liked us. Although we knew we would like them, we were big fans. But they were great, and so we ended up doing a venture competition. And we said, hey, if we do this, we want to make sure the city of Chicago knows about it. There's a lot of kind of media and encouragement of people to apply, and we got great applications. And when I was telling you about widening the funnel, right? A lot of deal flow comes from, hey, I know a friend of a friend, and that friend pitches, and there's sometimes an investment. But with this venture competition, it was media, radio, hey, Chicago Bulls, hey, we're doing this venture competition. There's going to be a $50,000 investment. You're going to pitch with other people. Eventually, the winner is going to be on center court. So we ended up doing that. And if you look at the stats here, it's incredible about the diversity of applicants. So this was a different way to widen the funnel. Now, we were, at the time, doing this venture competition with the Bulls and wanted to be inclusive and exciting about it. We just didn't realize how diverse the applicants would be. But it's just an example of how we can start doing something different to activate different filters and funnels. We ended up investing in a really great company called Honest Game, which enables student athletes who are going from high school to college to at least in the States, it's a very bureaucratic process. So if you're an awesome tennis athlete at a school and your school system doesn't have a lot of resources to ensure you're eligible for the NCAA, then a lot of people miss out on that opportunity. It's not the student's fault. It's not even the school's fault sometimes. It's just a very complex system. And so unless you have someone really focused on that process, you can actually not get your scholarship and not play, tennis for that college that you got into. And so Honest Game is a technology platform that enables that, plugs in with school systems, and helps. And so 2 women founders, both were athletes. They're awesome. Anyone we invest in become family members, and I can tell you they've been growing and impactful, and we're very grateful to be a part of the journey. So going back to my dream job, after starting SmileMD, Loud Capital, I started really assessing my job at my anesthesia job, right? So all these were side gigs at the time. All this work, this has been a side gig. The team's been growing on SmileMD. Loud Capital, the team's been growing. My co-founder, I was fortunate enough, he ended up exiting the company. And so when we started Loud Capital, he was full-time. I was still at the hospital while we were trying to figure out our identity and figure out, raise capital and invest and just build. A couple of years into starting the fund, I was starting to say, man, that would be great to do this full-time. There's so much excitement, so much work. And I'll tell you right now, at the hospital, and most physicians can understand this, it's not an exciting day. There's not really a lot of excitement. Excitement means scary and stuff's hitting the fan. Safe and boring is what you want as a physician. That means patients are doing well. There's not a lot of bad things happening. And so think about what that does for your mindset, right? You're walking in and essentially saying, gosh, I don't want any adrenaline surges. I just don't want any negative, crazy stuff to happen. It started wearing on me. And then I would leave the hospital, go into my entrepreneurial world, and be like, adrenaline, like so much to do, and it's your own, and you're putting in all this other creativity, parts of the brain you're not using. So I was starting to really change. And so, the dream job is still the dream job today, but I had changed. And that's something that I tell a lot of people, peers, kids, that like it's okay. You're going to change a lot. So what you love today, you might not love tomorrow, and that's okay. Like we need to give ourselves permission to be a little bit bored or something to move on towards a second career, third career. That's normal. No one ever told me that growing up. Um, so I became very fulfilled in entrepreneurship. I felt like I had ownership of my work, and I realized it's misspelled right there, which is silly. And I wasn't really, given expectations of, Naveen, you're going to get bored one day. When you become an anesthesiologist, there's a really good chance that you're going to become bored, and then you're going to want to do other things. So I tell people that right now in any professional, career path that they're in, that, here's the big mindset shift for me. Not what are you going to be when you grow up? It's what are you going to start with? And if you think about that little mindset shift, it's with giving expectations that you're going to be doing something and you're going to continue to want to problem solve and be creative. And so this whole journey that I've just mentioned, I ended up, writing a book on this because I get a lot of people that ask me, number one, how did you start Smile and D? How did you start Love Capital? Why? I can't wait. You're an anesthesiologist. What are you talking about? And why did you do that? So I wrote the whole journey of growing up, wanting to become a doctor, not being easy, all these kind of things, getting in, starting the two companies, starting the fund, how I look at venture capital, and then what I feel like people themselves can do to optimize themselves, right? I think a lot of it's internal. There's a lot of external things we want. We want to build our network. We want to make money or raise money or do things. There's a lot of things that we could optimize internally, and it's leveraging those tools. And sometimes we need a little bit of inspiration, but then we actually need tools that we can hold and we're in control with to move forward. And that's where the name and the subtitle comes from. Many people don't really realize about the adversity that physicians undergo, and if for those who've heard the term burnout, physician burnout, especially pandemic, the pandemic just stress tests the system so much that burnout is more common than it ever has been. But in fact, there's a lot of physicians that don't feel like they're in control. There's a lot of physicians who, even though they haven't started a company or they want to start a company, they feel like I do, where they're bored. They're not using their creativity. They're in a structured system where they supposedly, worked really hard and are at this peak where like I arrived, but how come I don't feel fulfilled? And it's just I would say in a short description, there are really intelligent, credible, hardworking people out there that are working as physicians right now, and I'll say many healthcare workers that just feel like they could be doing more and impact people in a larger way. And right now, the structure of a healthcare system is not enabling them to do that. So that's why I call it, physician underdog, because most people say, wow, you make good money, you do this, you're a doctor, I respect you. But a lot of physicians don't feel that way. And it's not for the respect factor, it's just fulfillment and kind of being mentally well. So I wrote this book. It's on Amazon and various markets, and I'm proud of it. And I've gotten some good feedback, and hopefully this talk and these questions and such, I'm happy to be helpful. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Navin. That was fantastic. Any questions for anyone whilst we've got Navin with us? Gary, Harry? Gary first.
Hi, Navin. Thanks for that. It was really interesting. There probably is lots and lots of questions, but I'm going to go with one, which is on the LAD, what you're doing, the Raising Venture Fund. And you've done the competition, And I'm wondering whether it was the amount that they put up, where they put up 50 grand, whether you could do the maths on if you give 50 grand to someone who's not as experienced, probably younger, probably a different diversity, can that grow better than if you give someone who, like you said earlier, a white middle class person, 500,000, and where do they go to? So I wonder if you had the actual facts on that, if that worked.
I would say we were, 50,000 obviously is not a ton of money depending on your stage of your company. I will say that we were looking at earlier stage, and in general, I would say nowadays we look at series seed, series A, but that's in the world of venture, it's a spectrum, and so people like to label these rounds. But the 50K in a vacuum would not be enough. But again, it's putting capital in and then putting a lot of strategic help, and by doing this competition so publicly, along with the Chicago Bulls and other people who have large networks, we were able to bring that experience and bring that mentorship along with the money. They ended up raising more capital. We even followed on because we were got to know them even more, and we were very proud of them. Their advisory board, I'm actually a current advisor with Honest Game, have been so helpful. And so Kim and Joyce, the two founders, have been very responsible and good with not only their capital, but acknowledging that they need a lot of help. And so this big puzzle, they only fit a couple pieces. How do we enable this whole puzzle to be built? And so that willingness to work with investors and other people is what we look for as well. And so that's why I believe that the success of them and many others we invest in are doing well, because that's a big piece for us is investing in people. And it's not about the obstacles you're going to face tomorrow. It's about the multiple obstacles over a lot of time. And so are you okay asking for help and swallowing your pride? And so I don't know if I asked you or if I answered your question, but if this was not two women, I mean, I can't throw out, there's a lot of stats that show women founders do amazing statistically for the amount of funding they get. In fact, there's plenty of articles that say, women founders do better, but I'm not here to put down any group of people. I'm just saying that we need to enable more founders in different pockets that aren't being invested in. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think you did. I think it was more around the case of if you imagine you're a youngster coming through, it's very daunting to go, I'm going to go out and raise £1 million or £500,000. But what I'm saying is it's virtually like a grant or a way of getting people into, because let's face it, we're not entrepreneurial. The young kids of today are really, really entrepreneurial. Give them a little bit of money and I'm sure they can succeed. But it's just getting that through. So it's really good that you've done that competition to help that progress.
Yeah, thank you.
Harry.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I've been very interesting indeed. You mentioned, and it's quite obvious that the fund is completely sincere about your focus on people and your ongoing support for people, and that you can help the entrepreneurs who you get involved with rather than just providing capital and whatever. I mean, we've seen, I'm sure you see in the States, we see here the amount of venture funds saying, for us, it's all about the people, or we support the people, and how few of them are actually follow through with that once the money has changed hands. How do you convince your investees and your particular people that you are, which you obviously are, different and sincere about this focus on the people themselves?
That's a wonderful question. I love to answer this because not that I'm necessarily right on this, but I want to give you a perspective, Harry, is when you look at the investors or the funds or the firms, it's important to look at their background and experience. And so there's many folks, peers of mine in the venture industry, much larger funds, much more successful, much more accomplished, who've never started a company, been part of a growth company, or been operational in a company. Now, if any of those boxes you can check when it comes to leadership, partners, etc., in a fund or a firm, and they have financial backgrounds only, been in investment banking and now started a fund, or I don't know, just kind of more of a siloed from the money world, then it's going to be very hard to empathize with the problems you're about to encounter. And I've seen that. And to me, that is the friction that occurs when, hey, I come from the investment banking world. There's a lot of money around me, and I'm running this fund. And as you know, many folks know, I mean, venture capital right now is very hot, and I don't see it going away for a while. And so there's a lot of really smart, especially on paper smart, accomplished folks who are trying to get into venture. The first question I ask is, have you ever started a business, or have you ever been a part of a growth business or operate in a startup? And many times it's like, no, but hey, I did my MBA here and I did whatever here. So and that's fine. There's no, but if you're looking at a comprehensive, hey, this journey is going to be crazy, not just about transactions and growth on a straight line. It's actually going to be really messy and it's going to piss you off. It's more that, can you bring empathy to the table? And that's where I feel personally with Smile MD, with Loud Capital, it's never been like a smooth line, and I understand that. And so when I invest in entrepreneurs, I don't expect 3 months from now there's going to be this crazy growth or this straight line. It's going to be like, hey, all right, what problems do we solve today? So hopefully that was helpful, but I think looking at backgrounds and experience is really important for that.
Thank you. Very interesting. Thanks, Navin.
You're welcome.
Gareth. I knew it'd be going with a G.
Close. Yeah, thanks, Navin. That was a fantastic, it's a fantastic presentation. Really wonderful to hear your journey. I'm kind of interested, maybe selfishly. I'm from I run an angel investment syndicate, so sort of pre-VC. But I'm really interested to hear whether it was all your and your founders' capital that you're putting up initially, or whether you had to bring in LPs, and if so, how did you make sure those LPs were aligned with your kind of moral mission to promote equality in investment?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of LPs actually around the country. We have individuals, we have some family offices, we're working on some institutions. So we started out with some of our own money, but that first angel fund was actually 10 investors around me that knew myself and Darshan and knew we were good, credible people and that we were new in the journey. And we're grateful that they invested in our judgment, essentially, especially that early on. Fast forward, now we have a track record, we have exits, and very proud to show the work that we've done. But yeah, we raised capital from various groups, angel groups, individuals, family offices, etc. And how do we ensure that they're aligned or at least believe in our mission is we're, just like I'm talking about venture capital right now, this is what I say to everybody. Everyone knows if you go to our website, Venture for People's on there, they start asking about what's important to us. And we say very similar things. Hey, we invest in the person. We want to make sure our funnel's wide enough. We also have, various LPs. We have more women investors. And so what we've been doing is like, how can we be better? And so some of our investors are like, you should be doing, or maybe you can be doing this. So one thing that we came up with is there are various women around us that want to learn more about venture, but they don't necessarily want to do it in the same way that we do it with a group of men having beers and just, asking these questions where maybe there's a little bit of testosterone and adrenaline, and it's not necessarily a comforting environment. So we specifically every quarter do an introduction to alternative investments for women. Right now it's in person. We also are going to start doing some virtual where it's just women, and it's like talking about why people invest in venture and alternative investments. And by the way, this is not a different talk. We do this, for men all the time, but there's not enough women that we can engage. And I would say they've given us feedback, don't feel comfortable enough to ask these questions openly. And so for us, it's providing that environment. So one of our women LPs is actually going to start running this and bringing in women founders and talking about why should you care, whether when you build your wealth, whether it's with a family or whether it's solo, whether it's whatever, why you should know about this. And so hopefully I answered your question in the sense where we ensure that venture capital is more comprehensive and impactful. And if I'm not telling the story and aligning with the investor, then that's on me. But I feel like we definitely get our message out.
That is amazing and really interesting to hear the correlation. We face exactly the same challenge here in the UK. You know, I think UK BAA, which is like the kind of industry association, if you will, for angel investments, has recorded the UK has about 13% of business angel investors are women, and that it really negatively affects the amount of women-founded startups that get backed. Because I mean, it's and if you're an ethnic minority, you know, non-white women, you're going to get sort of less than 0.5% of the VC money or something. It's just it's really terrible. But I mean, there are ventures happening to try and change that, and it begins with encouraging more people from more diverse you know, demographics to actually balance the makeup of the VC and angel investment world. So we're doing exactly the same sort of venture with some of our female LPs becoming mentors to encourage more female investors. It seems to be a slow process, but it needs to start and gain more traction. Awesome. So thanks for sharing your experience.
Yeah,
great question, Gareth. Thank you very much. Khalid and Hannah, please.
Hi, Navin. I think you guys have probably just answered my question. I really enjoyed the talk. Thank you. I'm also in the healthcare, women's healthcare business. And really my question was, I could see from your stats that the competition that you did with the Chicago Bulls, there was a great response from female founders and you supported, obviously the female founders won, but as a company, what's your percentage of actually, oh God, I've forgotten the word, when not supporting women, what's the percentage of how many people you oh God, I can't remember the word.
Underserved, including women founders as part of our portfolio. And I have to look up specifically women, but I apologize, I don't have the exact number, but we're at about 45% of our founders are from the underserved, including women.
Oh, that's really good.
We actually have really great stats that I'm proud of. And that's on me. I wish I knew the specific on women, but recently Women's Angel Fund and I were talking, and they said, hey, if you have women founders, let us know. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I sent a list of about 8 or 9 companies at least that we have that I sent over. I'm like, here you go. They're raising capital, and let me know if you want to invest in any of these or if I can make an intro. So, and that being said, whatever our number is, we're constantly trying to improve and be better. It's not just comparing to the national stats. But yeah, and anything you hear here, we're always willing to say, hey, you should try this. We're very willing and open. And again, I think one piece of feedback we got from the Chicago Bulls venture is it wasn't, hey, pitch to a VC so you can get funded for your startup. It was gamifying it. It was actually a fun competition, and that kind of lowered the obstacle for more women to invest, if you will. And that's an interesting perspective, right? So it's just like, how do you incorporate that more into your everyday world? And it's not always going to be in the United Center with the Chicago Bulls, but how can you bring that in the venture ecosystem?
Yeah, no, it was really interesting because I know a lot of people, they say that women are, I find as a woman myself, I'm in charge of the budget at home, so I'm very careful about what we spend our money on. And so if I was to go for investment, the fear for me is I'd be letting people down. So that's one kind of barrier for me as a female, is I wouldn't want to put myself in that position in case I wasn't able to fulfill my commitment. So I think that's always a barrier for women as well. We do think differently in that aspect, so we don't actually put ourselves forward for it. So yeah, but thank you. Great. Really enjoyed today's talk. Thank you.
Kelly, you're welcome. For that. Thank you very much. Hannah, then Divya. And I think we'll have to close it because it's probably still dark outside where you are, Navin, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Navin. I really, really enjoyed that. And especially talking about the female founders. I've been to funding events where I've looked out on a sea of white men. There was one event I went to, and there were 150 in the audience, and there were 3 women. And so it is really intimidating. It is a very different dynamic. And thank you so much for just helping our cause. I appreciate it. You spoke really eloquently about the strategic help that the investors offer. It's not just about the money. I was just on Dragon's Den, like Shark Tank, and got investment off Stephen Bartlett and Deborah Meaden. And because of the nature of those individuals, they are incredibly busy. And when I reach out with a specific, can you please do this? I sometimes get a yes or a no, and they have been very generous with what they can do. But my question would be, how do I make the most of them? Because I don't know sort of the full scope of what they can do for me, because I'm not quite sure of their networks and what they can, leverage and in their abilities and experience and skill set. So it feels a bit like I'm not making the most of them because I'm giving them quite specific asks that I've come up with myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to say that actually. If you had, if you know about them, obviously, and you can research as much, like, hey, they have a huge network in this specific silo, or I really think they could help me out, and you are asking specifically for help in that area, to me, you've done your part. I mean, I don't know what else you can do when people are really busy or they're not responding. I mean, that's, there's only so much you can do. But I was just about to tell you that, Hannah, is like, try to come up with something so specific because they're so busy. And if they look at it, boom, boom, boom. I'm trying to think of any other ways. Like, hey, I know another way, since they're technically invested, you could put it, hey, I know you're really busy. And I'm sure you've done this. I'm just trying to brainstorm here. I know you're really busy, and I know you have multiple companies, but your a couple intros in this specific thing can really uplift this company, and I will really, maybe start with language, because I think like that is, communication piece is just so big. And so if they have a quick minute, it's maybe the language of like, a couple of your intros can take this company in a different trajectory, and I appreciate any help.
Like excite.
Excite them, because and that's all. I don't have much else to say, but I understand, and I think at least you're thinking about it thoughtfully. And this happens, and I'm sure they invest in a lot of companies. So
brilliant, thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Navin. Now we've got Divya.
Hi, Navin, that was an incredible talk. So inspiring. I've come from a hospital background myself as an NHS pharmacist, but I left because I was exactly that, broken by the system, and just felt like I couldn't do what I wanted to do. So now I'm an entrepreneur, so it's really amazing to see that you managed to do both and kind of still take to like an entrepreneurial role. So my question to you is, I find it really interesting what you were saying about female founders, particularly women of color, it being a little bit more difficult, to get investment. This is something I didn't really know about, to be honest, and I'm starting to learn a little bit more as I read and obviously attend these talks. This might be a bit of a difficult question to answer. A, why do you think that is? And I don't know if anyone else can have some input on that. And B, what can myself and other people like myself, either women or women of color, do to try and bridge that gap and make people want to invest in us a little bit more?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Number one, I've heard from various women, including someone who mentioned this earlier, is a lot of women that I've heard don't like to ask for money. It is culturally something that is
true.
Yeah, we're men, including myself, like, yeah, let's do this. Here, let's, give me some money. It's not, it doesn't feel like, hey, I'm asking for money and that's a negative thing. It's I'm asking for money because I'm doing something exciting. And so that's what I think a significant difference is that I'm learning about women. And so it's not a failure, but it's like, I need money for my business. So I think there's women that aren't as proactive to ask for money. At least in the existing system that are run majority by men. Number two, I'll say again, I think when it comes to I would say people of color in general, when you look at friends and family net worth, like say here in the U.S., and you look at a white family and you look at a black family, and you look at wealth of friends and family, there's a significant difference. And so I'm a VC, and I say, hey, if you can prove yourself, raise some capital from friends and family or some angels around you, and number one, what that's showing is, you're early enough where people who know you and trust you will invest in you, and after you prove out and validate the model, you would be potentially considered for more sophisticated investors, okay? Now, what if your friends and family and people around you don't have much wealth? It's not your fault, right?
Yeah.
So if you just go from that exercise, that's unfair as it is. You're kind of set up to say, well, the people in this white bucket over here are going to be coming in my funnel because their friends and families much more wealth. So encouraging, number one, if you're a women founder coming from anywhere, is acknowledging that in this world, asking for money and raising capital is not a negative. It's something you have to do to fuel your business. So I think it's empowering yourself to feel that way and getting that clicked in your brain. And then number two, it's on the industry to start creating wider funnels and giving out this experience and data, because the stats are out there. Everyone knows it, but what are people actually doing to widen the funnel? We're very small, but philosophically, I think there are more people that are starting to think this way and widen the funnel. So I don't have anything overnight that we can do, but keep doing what you're doing. There are also more women funds popping up. There are, funds like ours and firms like ours where we're trying to get more women into venture. We're, getting more women advisors, we're getting more women investors, we're getting more women eventually here to join the team, but we're actively looking. So it's happening slowly, but it may be perhaps too slow for a lot of people.
Awesome. That's really helpful. I'll definitely connect with you on LinkedIn to maybe connect some of those amazing women you're talking about. Thank you.
Navin, that was fabulous. And I want everyone to join me in thanking Navin this morning for getting up and joining us. It was really good.